A 2014 study showed that the odds of clearing a Google interview was 10 times more harder than cracking an admission into Harvard University. Since then, a lot of tech companies in the Silicon Valley and globally have started to adopt a very similar interviewing style. And coding interviews are the major part of this interview pattern. So, what makes a coding interview really hard to crack? In this video, I'll be sharing some tips and tricks that helped me crack Google and Facebook interviews. A typical coding interview is a 45-minute round where you're given like 1 to 2 questions and asked to think on the spot for an algorithm that efficiently solves this problem and also implement the solution. I have a previous video on how to best go about this solving part to demonstrate very strong coding skills. In this video, we'll be talking about like what it takes to really think on the spot and crack a very hard coding question within this first 15 minutes. Before that, let's first break some myths. First, myth number 1. A good candidate would know the solution to each and every coding problem in the world. And that's not true. There's literally tens of thousands of coding problems across the internet, and you're really not going to be able to like figure out the solutions for everything. So even if I give the same interview twice, I probably may not be clearing it the second time. So there is some level of luck involved in coding, but at the same time, you really cannot be waiting until you know all possible solutions before you start giving interviews. The myth number 2 is that a great candidate can go in and solve a problem without any coding prep. They just know the answer right off the bat. And that's also not true. I think even if you can get lucky in like tracking 1 to 2 such questions, you'd be having 3 to 5 coding rounds and 1 to 2 questions each rounds. And the probability of you missing it once or twice might be much higher if you don't have enough preparation. So the key to cracking a coding interview is preparation. And it's not just like preparing over and over again, but preparing very strategically. What if I told you that I just prepared 300 questions properly and that really helped me crack Google and Facebook interviews? Think about it. That's literally just 10 questions a day for a month, or 5 questions a day over 2 months. And that's all it takes to really like solidify your coding interview skills and crack the dream jobs that you really want to achieve. And that's not a lot to ask out of you, isn't it? It's not just about practicing 300 questions, but it's picking and strategically working on these coding rounds to make sure that you maximize your chances of cracking the coding interview. Courtesy of the Geek for Geeks website, the image you're seeing in my screen lists a bunch of algorithms and data structures that are typically asked in the interviews. Take, for example, the graphs algorithm. As you look through more and more solutions in it, you'll realize that pretty much all the graph problems are tackled by one of the 3 approaches: breadth first search, depth first search, or a minimum spanning tree. So all you are trying to learn to solve graph problems is really trying to implement these 3 techniques and efficiently use them in solving a given problem. And once you have mastered this, when it comes down to an actual interview, it's merely about like when you're given a question, this is something that I could solve using graph. And the moment you make that connection, it's all about like mapping it to the one of these 3 techniques and applying that in practice for implementing something that you've already practiced thoroughly as a part of your coding prep. And this mapping from a question to a good algorithm that can be used to solve is the only missing piece that you're going to be cracking as a part of your interview, because the rest of the things are very similar to what you've already practiced in the past. And the mapping is merely a 2 to 3 minute thing that would come naturally with time and practice. For me, this practice came with about like 300 questions, and maybe for you it may come with like fewer questions or more, but I would definitely be surprised if it's going to be like way farther from this ballpark number. So go to the Geek for Geeks website and select an algorithm that you're trying to learn. From the list of problems in that section, pick 10 to 20 questions randomly and first try to understand these questions. So once I understood these questions, like I don't personally try to like solve every single problem because someone has already like done that and there's a very rich amount of discussion in the Geek for Geeks website. So I merely just look into the most efficient and the upvoted solution in that list, and I try to understand how this person has solved it and what are the tricks they've used to build an efficient solution. I try to understand the solution, and I have a notebook in which I hand write by hand in simple English on how this question was solved in a very simple list of steps that I can understand. And sometimes, if it is a complex implementation, then I code it up myself just to get familiar with the way the data structures are being used. But with time, I rarely tend to do that because I feel more comfortable with C++. But maybe if you are someone who struggles a lot with the implementation part, I would recommend you to consider coding up the solutions at the start, but you'll realize that with time you'll be more comfortable with it and you may choose to skip this step. So once you keep doing this over and over again, you'll notice that the solutions for the questions in a particular algorithm type become boringly identical. That's when you really have built a solid understanding of that particular algorithm type, and it's time to move on to the next one. And also, before every interview, I have this handbook handy so I can quickly brush through various questions and the pseudocode that I've written in my own simple English. Like having this in notebook helps me to carry it around for interviews and like quickly brush through and keep myself fresh with different tricks and like solutions, so that like once I get a question, I'm able to like quickly map it to the things that I've already learned. That's a good question. I really can't guarantee that even I would be able to clear the same company interviews again if I had to do it. Because there's always a little bit of a luck factor. As I mentioned earlier, no one can really know all the coding problems in the world, so there's definitely going to be some gaps. And if it's not your day, you might just hit that gap on that day. But having this kind of planned strategic practice helps you master some algorithms very confidently, such that you're probabilistically more likely to clear the coding rounds. Remember, there are not just Google and Facebook in the world. There are so many companies with very high caliber and very, very interesting interviews and problem spaces to work on. So, as you start getting better and better in coding interviews, your probability of cracking these companies and entering into a company of a high caliber becomes way higher. And hence, I believe this approach helps you build that command over algorithms and data structures and put you in a better position to crack the coding interviews. With this, I conclude my talk, and I hope you found this useful. And I'll also be closing my Job Hunt Essentials web series with this particular episode. If you're interested to know more, or if you want me to cover any other topics as a part of this theme, please feel to comment it out in the comment section. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you found this video and the series of videos useful for your career. Thank you so much. Bye.